Chrislyn Particka, and I'm the host and moderator for today's webinar. Our topic today is the pipeline from tissue culture to your vineyard with Tim Martinson and Josh Puckett. Tim is a senior extension associate at Cornell University and leads the statewide extension viticulture program. His program provides extension and applied research in viticulture to support the continued growth and profitability of the New York wine and grape industry. For the past 5 years, Tim has also served as the director of the Northern Grapes Project, and he is also involved with the National Clean Plants Network. Josh is the production manager at Foundation Plant Services, which is based at UC Davis. He holds an undergraduate degree in plant biology and is also currently enrolled in the plant pathology graduate program at UC Davis. For the past 10 years, he has worked in crop production and horticultural systems management, encompassing both container-grown nursery operations and field crop agriculture. Remember that as a participant in today's webinar, we ask that you keep microphones muted if you have them. If you are having any technical difficulties, please type a note in the chat pod over on the right side of your screen, and I'll do what I can to help. If you have questions, please type those in the chat pod as well. You'll note that there is a drop-down menu above the box where you type, and you can toggle it back and forth to send messages to everyone or just to me. Generally, it's better if you send them to everyone so that the entire audience can see it. We'll take a break between Tim and Josh's presentations to address some questions, and we'll have time at the end as well. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted online. I will send out an email with a link to where the recordings are posted to everyone who has registered. So with that, Tim, I'm going to let you get started. Thanks.
Thank you, Chrislyn, and greetings to everybody. It's great to see some familiar names on the participant list. I love doing webinars, and this is a great way to reach a lot of people. So I'd like to start by welcoming you to the first of what will be 4 weekly web broadcasts on the effort to produce and disseminate virus-tested certified vines to producers. And this is geared especially towards our producers here in the eastern United States. And we wanted to do this because we want to make producers aware of the enormous efforts that have happened behind the scenes that started in the mid-2000s, really, to improve the production and dissemination of virus-tested planting material to producers and nurseries across the United States. Now, this renewed effort started with the establishment of the National Clean Plant Network in the 2008 Farm Bill, which provided support and coordination to efforts of 5 grape clean plant centers across the United States. And now is a good time because plant material is resulting from this effort is now making its way from foundation blocks to nursery. And here in New York, the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets is revitalizing its grapevine certification program, which has been dormant since the early 90s. And finally, our nurseries in New York are investing money and effort into improving their propagation practices. So today, Josh and I will focus on the pipeline and talk about what is involved in producing virus-tested plant material and moving it along from the foundation plantings to nurseries to vines. So I'm really pleased to have Joshua Puckett join us today for this webcast, and thanks to Deborah Galino, the Director of Foundation Plant Services, for arranging this. As Chrislyn says, we welcome questions, so please post at any time by typing into the chat bar. Just an overview of the series. We will continue weekly at the same time for the next 4 Thursdays at noon Eastern Time. So next week it will be Mark Fuchs, Annemiek Schilder, and Mizuho Nita, who's going to talk about the viral diseases and their impact in Michigan, Virginia, and New York. The following week, then, Tom Burr is going to talk about the prospects for crown gall elimination. And Shadi Atala, who is an economist that came through Cornell and has worked a lot in this area, is going to talk about the value of virus tested plant material. So finally, our last webinar will be a look at New York's revitalized grapevine certification program, and then the nursery's plan for the future. We plan to have this one run a little longer because we do have 5 speakers lined up for this. So that will close out our series. So today, I'm going to look back at, start by looking at vine propagation practices here in New York and highlight some of the impacts that pathogens have had on our industry. Then I'll talk about the National Clean Plant Network, and finally I'm going to walk you through a timeline that starts at Foundation Plant Services to the Vineyard and really illustrates the time lags involved in the pipeline. Then at the end, Joshua will take over and describe in detail the processes used at Foundation Plant Services for virus elimination and establishing foundation blocks. Okay, to start out, there is a very long list of grapevine viruses that attack grapes. Some are more serious than others, but one thing is true of all of them is that once the plant has them, there is no cure. There's really no cure. And this is a replant that was put in following the 2004 freeze that already has leaf roll virus, and that's going to continue to have leaf roll virus. So the only choice is to remove that vine and replant with clean planting material, or suffer the consequences for the life of the vineyard. So just want to talk a little bit about viruses. So the Nipah viruses are ones that are transmitted by nematodes. Those include fan leaf, tomato ring spot virus, which we'll talk about a little later, and tobacco ring spot virus. The leaf roll associated viruses are spread by mealybugs. And this is a fairly recent knowledge that dates back to maybe the early 80s that the mealybugs were the vector that would transmit it. So in other words, it's not just a problem that you have your vines infected, but they'll also spread from these infection foci over time. So the most recent one is this new virus, this Gemini virus, grapevine red blotch associated virus, which has gotten a lot of press yet. We don't know the vector of that, but there's several research teams that are sort of closing in on that as we speak. So first question is, how did they get there? Well, they got here over time from propagation material. And a lot of it happened because historically in the grape industry, there's a lot of self-propagation. Growers propagated their own vines. They collected this material from production blocks, and then nurseries, when the nurseries came on a little later, they collected them from their customers, and still continuing to do that from this to this day. So one of the things about this that is unique, that has led to some problems, is this collection generally occurs when the vines are dormant in the winter. So if you have a block of mixed varieties, or if you have an off-type vine, so you're going down collecting this wood, and all of a sudden you come across a big vine with lots of wood, you collect a lot of wood from that, but chances are that it's bigger because it's a different type of vine, an off-type vine. So there's been problems with these collections in trueness to type. And finally, even if you see leaf symptoms during the growing season, you might not see them during the dormant season. So the only way to get around that would be to collect during, or to mark the vines beforehand and avoid collecting from the ones that have symptoms. And so that generally wasn't done. So finally, there is the thing that the virus and the vector identification really started in the 1970s. We had woody indexing and indicator plants before that, but really our ability to detect the viruses started with ELISA tests and has continued with DNA tests, and that really started in the 70s and 80s. And vectors, as I mentioned, weren't always identified either. So in the East, we have a long history of grape production from the mid-1800s. So it was native Labrusca type grapes that were dominant then, still are in New York, but often those would carry the viruses and show no symptoms. Starting in the 1940s, but really picking up in the 1970s, we had a lot of French hybrid varieties from different sources planted here in the Finger Lakes and other parts of the East. Then the new hybrids from Cornell and other breeding programs were introduced. And then finally in the 1980s, widespread vinifera plantings in the East. That's when that really took hold. So with each change in varieties, then we're gathering plant material from a wider area. And it really was in the 1970s that things started to really, some of the problems with viral disease started to really present themselves here in the Finger Lakes. I'm going to go through a couple examples. But one of the challenges of producing clean plants in the East is that we have such a wide range of varieties from different species, unlike the Western industry that is mostly based on Vitis vinifera. We have all sorts of germplasm from all sorts of places. So that makes it kind of a longer list of varieties and a wider range of genetics involved. So I want to talk about a few things that historically have had caused some problems here. And the first one started in that planting bloom of French hybrids in the 1970s. On the left, you see Vidal Blanc with tomato ring spot infections. You see the scraggly cluster. On the right, you see Chalois, or Chalois, as some people call it here. So this affected several French hybrid varieties, Vidal Blanc, Baco Noir, Deschanec, which are still around, but others that have virtually disappeared, like Cascade, Chalois, Ventura. You don't see those around anymore, and this virus is part of the reason why. So I want to go through sort of the acreage figures over several years with tomato ring spot virus to illustrate, one of the impacts of this virus. And starting out, we had over 600 acres in 1985. The first thing that happened was there was a market adjustment. They were overplanted. There was too much production, so the acreage dropped by half by 1990. But a little later on then, from 1996 to 2006, you could see in that 10 years, our production and acreage, our acreage declined by 70% and our production declined by about 85%. And while some of this is probably due to people, market solutions, some of it was due to the ring spot virus. If you look at the center photo on the right, what many growers found was that as their canopy pooped out and they wanted to do trunk renewals, they were faced with these stunted shoots with zigzaggy stems that were a result of the leaf roll virus infection. So across all these varieties and over 10 years, the impact in the Finger Lakes was probably somewhere around, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 acres out of production as a result of this nursery transmitted disease. The other example is leaf roll in the Finger Lakes, and we really became aware of this when Mark Fuchs started in 2005, 2006, started finding a lot of leaf roll around, there's the symptoms on the left in Cabernet Franc and Chardonnay, but on the right you can see this Limburger block, 4 rows that is almost totally infected with leaf roll virus. But then it really hit home after we had a freeze event in 2004. We lost about a quarter of our vinifera vines in the Finger Lakes, and growers ordered lots of vines for replants. And you can see in the middle here, this is a replant that was put in after 2004. The grower involved in this put in something like 2,000 replants, and about half of them came up with these symptoms within a year of planting. So that's good impetus for trying to do some virus elimination. On the right, this is just some things I did, and I'm not going to describe them early, but the consequences for their vineyards, with Cabernet Franc at least, are a delay in bricks. And you can see on the bottom graph there that when we looked at 14 different blocks, those figures represent the lower Brix at harvest in vines that are right next to each other in blocks with and without leaf roll symptoms. So that's a pretty severe effect, and this is something that can really have a big impact on the economics of your vineyard. The last one is crown gall disease, and it's not clear that we're going to be able to totally eliminate this through virus-tested plants, but Tom Burr has been involved in therapy to clean up the plants and also testing lots of the stuff that's been involved in the new plantings. So he's going to talk about that in 2 weeks. So I want to just briefly cover what the National Clean Plant Network is. So it was set up as a national network of centers, scientists, regulators, and educators from universities, departments of agriculture, the federal government, USDA, and with a focus on providing healthy planting stock to nurseries and growers. And you know, when this slide was made, there were 5 different participating crops: fruit trees, grapes, berries, hops, and citrus. And now there's also rose and I believe sweet potatoes. So this is infrastructure that's been set up in these different crops, each with their own governance. So this came about as a result of the Farm Bill in 2008, which was really the first time that the USDA really explicitly got involved in pathogen diagnosis and elimination in vegetatively propagated plants such as grapes. So it was set up to rely on existing clean plant centers, provide clean plant material for the industry, to work with universities and departments of agriculture in different states. And it was funded initially at $5 million a year for 4 years. So this has provided infrastructure to the industry to allow these clean plant centers to be productive. So in NCP and grapes, there's 5 centers at Prosser, Davis, Missouri State, Cornell, and Florida A&M. Each one of them specializes a little bit. For example, the Florida A&M specializes in muscadine grapes. But this is the infrastructure that was set up in 2008. And so I want to finish out my section by talking about the pipeline from 2008. So what all this work in setting up this and infrastructure has produced. I would compare it in sort of to something like the interstate highway system, which really came into being in the 50s, but really the construction started in the 60s and 70s and continued. So this is a long-term investment by the federal government into producing what is a long-term benefit. Okay, so I want to focus on the pipeline here, so I'm going to walk you through what happens to imported selections and domestic varieties from the very start. So when they arrive at the clean plant centers, they don't know the phytosanitary status of these grapes. So the first step is to do diagnostic and therapies. So the diagnosis involves a number of laboratory tests of the ELISA and DNA, and Josh will describe these a little bit more fully. And they still do woody indexing, that is grafting buds onto plants. So this takes about 2 to 3 years to do. If they are clean, then they can be released to the next step, but if they are not, then we go through virus elimination, which involves meristem culture, minimum of 2 years for that to come, and then retesting. So from there, we go on to the Foundation Plant Service mother blocks. And so this is where the budwood and cuttings are distributed. So as they establish these new plants out in the vineyard, again, it's 3 to 4 years to full production to where they can distribute a lot of budwood. But they do also do mist propagation, which Josh will describe, which will get a few more vines out the door earlier. So down below this, I see this is a new mother block planted at a nursery here in New York. And so in order to fill this block out, which was just started a couple of years ago, this grower is relying on mist-propagated vines in the greenhouse, so that takes a year to produce buds. So he takes that budwood and grafts them and plants them into the field. Then it's another 2 to 4 years to full production. And then each one of these vines at full production can produce about 2 to 3 bud cuttings for producing own-rooted vines. So Margaret will describe this later on, but these blocks are going to undergo surveillance and testing by New York State Department of Ag and Markets. So both the mother blocks at FPS and the nursery mother blocks will be under audit and quality control. If they should acquire a virus, then they will be removed, and procedures for taking those offline and out of the process will happen. So finally, the end result of this, and in this mother block, there's going to be 150 vines of each variety. So you can produce about 2 to 3 bud cuttings from this, own-rooted, about 7,500 vines. If they were for grafting and it was just budwood, probably a few more, like 10,000 or 12,000 vines. And then finally, after this step, we have vines ready to sell and plant in your vineyard. So looking at the time lags built in here, so 2 to 6 years for the diagnosis and therapy, 6 years if you need to generate a new plant and retest it, another 3 to 5 years for the mother blocks, another 3 to 4 years for the nursery blocks, and then from there to production. So if you look at this whole process, we're looking at from import to commercial vineyard, 10 to 17 years. So that tells me that this is a long-term process, and that's as the years go by, we're going to see lots and lots more of this material, but it's not going to happen immediately all over the place. So just the benefits, and this is a slide that Mark Fuchs did. The industry is going to get a lot of benefits from the certification process, such as improved cleanliness of the planting material, fruit quality, yield, better productive lifespan of the vineyards, and reduced losses due to vineyard establishment. That should impact profitability. And then that should help growers avoid the penalty for poor fruit quality associated with inferior fruit from infected vines. Okay, so that's about it for me, but I wanted to mention here at the end that this is all going to come at a cost to the nurseries. They are going to be coming up with a more valuable product, and incurring lots of costs and investments to make this product. So you can expect that to pay somewhat more for these vines, certified vines, when they reach the pipeline. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to address them, and then we'll turn it over to Josh. Thanks.
Okay, we've just had one question come in so far, and it was from David, who asked, what is mist propagation? And Josh answered that in the chat pod, said that he'll try to answer it in his presentation, but that in general, these are 2-node own-rooted cuttings that we produce in an inert media on a mist bench. Other than that, we haven't had any questions come in. So,
okay, well, thanks everybody